The mess hall on Galactic Council Station Helix 9 was always loud during the midday meal. Hundreds of beings from dozens of species filled the long tables, their voices mixing together in a constant hum of conversation. Laughter echoed off the metal walls. Friends called out to each other across the room. Trays clattered. Chairs scraped against the floor as people made room for newcomers. But in the far corner, near the window that looked out into the endless black of space, there was silence. Sat alone at a table meant for 8. Her pale, almost transparent skin caught the light from the stars outside, giving her an ethereal glow that others found unsettling. Her large, dark eyes moved slowly across the room, watching the life that happened around her but never included her. She was, and that single fact had shaped her entire existence. She picked at her food without appetite. It was a simple meal, the same thing she ate every day. She had stopped trying new dishes long ago. What was the point of enjoying food when there was no one to share it with? A group of merchants walked past her table. One of them glanced in her direction, and his face twisted with disgust. He grabbed his companion's arm and steered him toward a table on the other side of the hall, pretended not to notice. She had become very good at pretending. They were not always hated. Centuries ago, her people had been respected members of the galactic community. They were known for their skill in preserving knowledge, for their calm nature, and for their beautiful music. But then the plague had swept through the galactic core, killing millions. Someone had needed to be blamed, and with their unusual biology and quiet ways, had been an easy target. The accusation was simple and terrible. They said they had created the plague. They said her people were carriers of disease, walking infections that spread death wherever they went. It was a lie. Years later, scientists proved that the plague had originated from a comet that had crashed into a mining colony. That had nothing to do with it. But by then the damage was done. The fear had taken root too deeply. Other species still avoided them, still whispered when they passed, still moved away when a sat down nearby. The truth did not matter. The feeling remained. Had grown up with this reality. Her mother had taught her to expect it, to build walls around her heart so the rejection would not hurt so much. Her father had told her to be proud of who she was, even when the galaxy told her she was worthless. She had tried to follow their advice. Some days it worked. Most days it did not. She was 23 years old in human terms, still young by standards. She had come to Helix 9 with dreams of making a difference, of proving that her people deserved better. She had earned a position as a junior archivist in the station's vast library, one of the largest collections of knowledge in the known galaxy. It was good work, important work. She told herself that it was enough. But every day, when she walked into the mess hall and saw the way people looked at her, she felt those dreams grow smaller. She remembered her first week on the station. She had been so hopeful then. She had smiled at strangers, tried to start conversations, even asked if she could join a table of researchers who seemed friendly. They had stared at her like she had asked to poison their food. One of them had actually covered his drink with his hand, as if her very presence might contaminate it. After that, stop trying. She finished her meal in silence, as she always did. She carried her tray to the recycling station, as she always did. She walked back toward the library, as she always did. The routine was comfortable in its emptiness. It asked nothing of her except to keep moving, keep breathing, keep existing. The library was her sanctuary. Among the ancient texts and glowing data crystals, she could forget what she was. She could lose herself in the stories of other worlds, other times, other lives. She could imagine being someone else, someone who was welcomed instead of feared. Her supervisor, a elderly named, was kind to her in his own way. He did not avoid her like others did. He gave her interesting assignments and praised her work when she did well. But even he kept a certain distance, a professional barrier that never quite came down. She understood. He had a reputation to protect. Being too close to it could cost him. That evening, as organized a collection of star charts from the third expansion era, she heard news that made her pause. A human delegation was arriving tomorrow. Humans were relatively new to galactic politics, having only made contact with other species about 50 years ago. They were curious, energetic, and sometimes confusing. They had strange customs and even stranger food. Most importantly, they had no history with the felt something stir in her chest. It was a small thing, barely noticeable, but it was there. Hope. Maybe these humans would be different. Maybe they would see her as a person instead of a plague. She shook her head and pushed the thought away. She had hoped before, and it had only brought pain. It was better to expect nothing. That way, she could not be disappointed. She finished her work and returned to her small quarters on the residential deck. Her room was neat and spare, with few personal belongings. There were some books, a few images of her family back home, and a small plant that she had managed to keep alive despite everything. She watered the plant, ate a small dinner, and went to bed early. As she lay in the darkness, she thought about the humans again. She had read about them in the archives. They were a contradictory species, capable of great cruelty and great kindness. They had fought terrible wars among themselves, yet they had also built beautiful things and dreamed impossible dreams. They were, according to one scholar, the most unpredictable species in the galaxy. Did not know what to make of them, but as sleep finally came, she allowed herself one small wish. Maybe, just maybe, one of them would look at her and see something worth knowing. It was a foolish wish, she knew. But in the quiet darkness of her room, with the stars spinning slowly outside her window, she held on to it anyway. Tomorrow everything would change. She just did not know it yet. The human delegation arrived on a bright morning, their transport ship docking at Bay 7 with a gentle hum. Watched from a distance as they stepped onto the station, a group of about 20 individuals of various ages and appearances. They wore simple clothes in blues and grays, and they looked around with wide, curious eyes, taking in everything with obvious wonder. She had come to the docking bay to deliver some archived documents to a council official. It was a simple errand, nothing important. But she found herself lingering, watching the newcomers as they gathered their belongings and spoke to the station's welcoming committee. One of the humans caught her attention. He was young, perhaps her own age in human terms, with warm brown skin and dark hair that curled slightly at his temples. He smiled easily, laughing at something one of his companions said. There was something open about his face, something unguarded that found strange. Most beings learn to hide their emotions in public. This human seemed to wear his on the surface, visible for anyone to see. His name, she would later learn, was Danny. She delivered her documents and returned to the library, pushing the humans from her mind. They were just another delegation, another group of strangers who would spend a few weeks on the station before leaving. They had nothing to do with her. But at midday, when she took her tray to her usual corner table, everything changed. The mess hall was more crowded than usual. The human delegation had joined the other beings for lunch, and their presence had created a buzz of excitement. Everyone wanted to see the newcomers, to study their strange eating habits and listen to their unfamiliar language. Moved through the crowd with practiced invisibility, keeping her head down and her eyes fixed on the floor. She reached her corner table and sat down, relieved to have made it without incident. She began to eat, her gaze drifting to the window and the stars beyond. She did not notice the human approaching until he was standing right beside her. Looked up, startled. It was the young man from the docking bay, the one with the easy smile. He was holding a tray of food, and he was looking directly at her with an expression she could not read. She waited for the moment of realization, the flash of recognition when he understood what she was. She waited for him to apologize and walk away, embarrassed by his mistake. She had seen it happen before, many times. But the moment did not come. Instead, the human smiled and said, "Mind if I join you? The view from this corner is actually pretty great." Did not know how to respond. Her mouth opened, but no words came out. She looked around, certain that this must be some kind of joke, that his friends were watching from somewhere and laughing at her confusion, but she saw nothing except the normal chaos of the mess hall. The human sat down across from her without waiting for an answer. He placed his tray on the table and began unwrapping something that looked like a sandwich. He took a bite, chewed thoughtfully, and then looked at her again. "I am Danny," he said. "Danny, I am part of the cultural liaison team. We are here to learn about how things work on this station." He paused, tilting his head slightly. "What is your name?" His voice came out smaller than she intended. Danny repeated, as if testing how the word felt in his mouth. "That is a beautiful name. What do you do here on the station?" She stared at him, still waiting for the other shoe to drop. "I am an archivist. I work in the library." "The library?" Danny's eyes lit up with genuine interest. "I love libraries. All that knowledge, all those stories just waiting to be discovered. It must be amazing to work there." Did not know what to say. No one had ever called her work amazing before. No one had ever shown interest in it at all. Around them, the mess hall had grown quieter. Could feel the eyes of other beings on her, on them. She saw a merchant at a nearby table staring with open shock. A group of traders were whispering to each other, their antennae twitching with agitation. Danny seemed completely unaware of the attention, or perhaps he simply did not care. He continued eating his sandwich, asking questions about her work, about the library's collection, about her favorite things to read. His questions were simple and friendly, the kind of questions anyone might ask a new acquaintance. Slowly, hesitantly, began to answer. She told him about the ancient star charts she was organizing, about the rare texts from civilizations that had vanished long ago. She told him about a book of poetry she had found last month, written in a language that no one spoke anymore. She told him things she had never told anyone because no one had ever asked. Danny listened with full attention. He nodded at the right moments, asked follow-up questions, laughed when she made a small joke that she had not even realized was funny. He treated her like she was interesting, like she was worth talking to. When the meal ended and they both had to return to their duties, Danny stood and smiled at her again. "This was nice," he said. "Same time tomorrow." Blinked tomorrow. "Yeah, I mean, unless you do not want to, but I enjoyed talking with you and I would like to do it again." He shrugged, a casual human gesture that somehow conveyed both hope and acceptance. No pressure, though. Heard herself say yes before she could think about it. Danny's smile widened, and he gave her a small wave before walking away to join his delegation. She sat alone at her corner table for a long moment after he left, her food forgotten and growing cold. She could still feel the stares of other beings on her, the weight of their confusion and judgment. She knew there would be whispers, rumors, speculation about what the human wanted from the girl. But for the first time in years, she did not care. Someone had sat beside her. Someone had talked to her like she was a normal person. Someone had asked to see her again. It was such a small thing, she thought. Just a shared meal, just a simple conversation. But too, it felt like the first crack of light in a very long darkness. She did not know yet that this was only the beginning. True to his word, Danny came back the next day, and the day after that, and every day for the next 2 weeks. At first, expected it to stop. She woke each morning preparing herself for disappointment, certain that this would be the day he finally understood his mistake. But each midday, when she walked into the mess hall with her tray, Danny was already there at the corner table, waving at her with that easy smile. He brought her things. Small things, simple things, but things that meant the world to her. The first gift was a book of earth poetry, filled with words about love and loss and hope. The second was a packet of something called chocolate, which was sweet and strange and wonderful. The third was a pressed flower sealed in clear resin, its delicate petals frozen forever in time. "It is called a rose," Danny explained, watching her turn the small disc over in her hands. "They grow on Earth. They smell amazing when they are fresh. I thought you might like to have something from my home." Held the rose like it was the most precious thing she had ever owned. In many ways, it was. Danny also learned her language's greeting. Was a difficult tongue, full of soft sounds and subtle meanings that most species could not master. But Danny practiced every night, and one morning he greeted her with a word that only her own people used. He said, slightly mispronouncing it but getting close enough. It meant something like bright morning to your heart. His eyes filled with tears. She turned away quickly, pretending to look for something in her bag, not wanting him to see how much the gesture had affected her. The other humans began to notice what Danny was doing. At first, they simply watched from across the mess hall, curious about his strange friendship. But then, one by one, they started joining him. The first was a woman named. She had kind eyes and dark hair streaked with silver, and she worked as the delegation's medical officer. She sat down beside without ceremony, introduced herself, and placed a small bracelet on the table. "I made this," said. "It is a tradition where I come from. We give bracelets to people we want to welcome into our circle." She pushed it toward. "I would like you to have it." The bracelet was woven from colored threads, simple but beautiful. Put it on with shaking hands. Others followed. Brooks, a pilot with broad shoulders and a loud laugh, brought stories of Earth skis. He told about flying through clouds, about chasing storms, about the way the sun looked when it set over an ocean. He made the table shake when he laughed, and his joy was so genuine that found herself smiling without meaning to. A quiet engineer named Lisa taught a human card game during one lunch break. A young scientist named showed her pictures of Earth animals and asked endless questions about biology. Each day, the corner table grew more crowded. The other beings on the station watched with growing confusion. The humans did not seem to understand the rules. They did not know that they were supposed to be avoided, feared, rejected. They simply saw a person sitting alone and decided she should not be. One evening, after the mess hall had emptied, told something that changed how she understood humans forever. "You know," he said, leaning back in his chair, "we humans have a pretty ugly history when it comes to this kind of thing." Looked at him, not understanding. "I mean treating people badly because of what they are instead of who they are." His usual smile faded. "We used to hate each other for the color of our skin, can you believe that? For where we were born, for who we loved, for how we prayed. We built whole systems to keep certain people down. We did terrible things." Was shocked. She had read about human history, but she had not expected to hear such honesty from one of them. "We are still learning," Danny added quietly. "We have not fixed everything. We still make mistakes, still hurt each other, still have to fight against our worst instincts. But we learned something important along the way." What asked? "That the worst thing you can do is look away when someone is suffering alone." Danny's eyes met hers. "We know what it feels like to be the ones other people fear. Maybe that is why we do not see you the way they do." Nodded. "When you have been the outcast, you recognize the look in another outcast's eyes, and you know that the only right thing to do is sit down beside them." Was silent for a long moment. She thought about all the years she had spent alone, all the rejection she had accepted as normal. She thought about how different things might have been if just one person had chosen to see her. "Why?" she finally asked. "Why do you care? You barely know me. Helping me could hurt your standing with the council. It could damage your mission here." Danny shrugged. "Some things are more important than standing. And besides," he grinned, "we happen to think you are worth knowing." That night, returned to her quarters and sat by the window for a long time, looking out at the stars. The bracelet had given her was still on her wrist. Danny's book of poetry was on her nightstand. The pressed rose sat on her shelf beside the picture of her family. She was not alone anymore. It was a strange feeling, one she had almost forgotten. But as she sat there in the quiet darkness, watching the universe spin slowly outside her window, she realized something else. The humans had not just sat beside her. They had reminded her that she deserved to have someone sit beside her. And that perhaps was the greatest gift of all. Change came slowly, like water wearing away stone. At first, it was barely noticeable. A trader who had always avoided section of the library began nodding to her when they passed in the corridors. A merchant who had once recoiled at her presence started eating his meals a few tables closer to the corner. Small things, quiet things, but things that had never happened before. The humans continued their daily visits to table, laughing and talking and treating her like an old friend. Other species watched them with a mixture of confusion and growing curiosity. These newcomers, these strange beings from a distant world, seemed to have no understanding of the old fears. They touched hands when they spoke to her. They shared food from their plates. They acted as if spending time with her was the most natural thing in the galaxy. And slowly, some began to wonder if perhaps they had been wrong. The first to approach was a young scientist named. He was thin and nervous, with trembling antennae that betrayed his anxiety. He found working alone in the library one afternoon, organizing a collection of ancient medical texts. "Archivist," he said, his voice barely above a whisper. "I wanted to, that is, I need to say." Looked up at him, waiting. "I am sorry," the words came out in a rush. "I have worked on this station for 3 years. I have seen you here almost every day, and I never once spoke to you. I never even looked at you properly. I just believed what everyone else believed without ever questioning it." He paused, gathering himself. "Watching those humans with you, seeing how they treat you, it made me realize how wrong I have been. I do not expect you to forgive me, but I wanted you to know that I see you now, truly see you." Did not know what to say. She had imagined this moment 1,000 times, but now that it was happening, she found herself without words. "Thank you," she finally managed. "That means more than you know." Nodded awkwardly and hurried away, but that evening, he came to the mess hall and asked if he could sit at the corner table. Danny welcomed him with a smile and a handshake, and felt something warm spread through her chest. Others followed. An engineer named asked to join them for lunch, bringing a plate of food from his own culture to share. An elderly scholar stopped in the corridor and bowed deeply, a gesture of profound respect in his culture. Even her supervisor in the library began treating her differently, meeting her eyes when he spoke and occasionally asking about her day. The invisible wall around was crumbling. But not everyone was pleased. Prefect was a senior council representative, a massive being from a warrior species called the. He had spent decades building political alliances and navigating the complex web of galactic relationships. He did not like surprises, and he did not like humans. He summoned Danny to his office late one evening. The prefect's chambers were large and intimidating, filled with trophies and symbols of power. Sat behind a desk made of polished black stone, his scaled face unreadable as Danny entered. "You wanted to see me, Prefect." Danny kept his voice calm and respectful. "I will be direct with you, human." His voice was like grinding rocks. "Your association with the girl is causing problems. There are those on this station who find it disturbing. There are those who question whether your species understands how things work in this galaxy." Danny remained still. "I am not sure I understand the problem, Prefect." "The problem is simple." Leaned forward, his massive hands flat on the desk. "They are not trusted. They carry the weight of old accusations. Whether those accusations are fair does not matter. What matters is perception. And by openly befriending this girl, you are damaging your delegation's standing. You are associating yourselves with pariahs." Danny was quiet for a long moment. When he spoke, his voice was steady and calm. "With all respect, Prefect, I think you are wrong." His eyes narrowed dangerously. "Excuse me. If our standing depends on treating someone like she is a disease when she is not, then our standing is not worth much." Danny met the prefect's gaze without flinching. "Has done nothing wrong. She is kind, intelligent, and The only reason she sits alone is because everyone decided to believe a lie that was disproved centuries ago. He took a breath. Humans have made many mistakes in our history. We have hurt and excluded and feared people who did not deserve it. But we have also learned from those mistakes. And one thing we learned is that silence in the face of injustice makes you part of the injustice. Stared at him for a long moment. You would risk your mission, your political future for one archivist. I would risk a lot more than that, Danny said simply. Because if we cannot stand up for what is right, then we have no business being here at all. The prefect said nothing. Danny waited, unsure whether he had just destroyed everything his delegation had worked for. But he found that he did not regret his words. Some things were more important than politics. Finally, leaned back in his chair. His expression was strange, almost confused, as if he were seeing something he had never seen before. "You may go," he said quietly. Danny nodded and left without another word. That night he told nothing about the meeting. He simply sat beside her at dinner, asked about her day, and listened as she told him about a rare manuscript she had found in the archives. But across the mess hall, Prefect sat alone at his own table, watching the humans and the girl with new eyes. He was beginning to understand that he had underestimated them. They all had. Months passed and the station slowly became a different place. No longer ate alone. Her corner table, once a symbol of isolation, had become the most sought-after spot in the mess hall. Beings from a dozen species now gathered there each day, sharing food and stories and laughter. The invisible wall that had surrounded her for so long had not just crumbled. It had vanished entirely. She had been invited to join a research team studying ancient communication methods. She had been asked to speak at a symposium on reconciliation. She had made friends, real friends, who called her by name and remembered her birthday and asked about her family back home. And at the center of it all was Danny, the young human who had started everything simply by refusing to look away. The anniversary came on a quiet morning. 1 year since Danny had first sat beside her in the mess hall. 1 year since everything had changed. Woke early, as she always did, and went about her routine without thinking much about the date. It was only when she arrived at the library and found a note on her desk that she realized something was happening. The note was written in Danny's handwriting, slightly messy but full of warmth. It said simply, "Corner table, midday, be there." When walked into the mess hall at noon, she stopped in her tracks. The corner table had been transformed. Strings of soft lights hung from the ceiling above it. Flowers from a dozen different worlds surrounded the chairs. A banner stretched across the window, hand-painted with words in both English and 1 year of friendship. And gathered around the table were all the people who had become her family. Danny stood at the head, grinning broadly, was beside him holding a beautifully wrapped box, was setting up a small speaker to play music. Lisa, and so many others filled the remaining seats, all of them looking at with expressions of love and joy. "Surprise," Danny said, his voice catching slightly. "Happy anniversary." She could not move. She could not speak. All she could do was stand there as tears streamed down her pale cheeks. Came forward and took her hands. "We wanted to do something special," she said gently, "to mark the day that everything changed, not just for you but for all of us." She led to the table where a seat of honor had been prepared. The box had been holding was placed in front of her. Inside was a ceremonial sash, made of earth silk and hand-embroidered with symbols. It was beautiful beyond words. "This is for you," said. "We made it together. Each of us added something to it, something that represents what you mean to us." Traced the patterns with her fingers. She recognized Danny's uneven stitches, his careful work, his bold colors. Each thread was a piece of someone's heart, woven together for her. Danny raised a glass filled with something that sparkled in the light. The others did the same. "To," he said, his voice strong and clear. Who taught us that the best discoveries are not found in star charts, but in the people we choose to see? Who reminded us why kindness matters? Who gave us the gift of her friendship when she had every reason not to? He looked at her and his eyes were shining. We are the lucky ones, every single one of us. Two, the others echoed, and the sound of their voices filled the mess hall. Stood slowly, the sash clutched to her chest. She looked at each face in turn, seeing not just friends but family. She thought about the girl she had been 1 year ago, the lonely archivist who had accepted isolation as her fate. She thought about all the empty meals, all the silent nights, all the times she had told herself that she did not deserve better. She had been so wrong. "I do not have the words," she said finally, her voice trembling. "In all my years of working with languages and texts, I cannot find the right words to tell you what this means to me." She paused, gathering herself. "I spent so long believing that I was unwanted, that something about me was wrong, broken, deserving of rejection. I built walls around my heart because I thought the pain would be easier if I expected it. I stopped hopping because hope felt too dangerous." She looked at Danny. "And then you sat down beside me. You asked my name. You treated me like I was worth knowing." Her voice broke. "You looked at me like I was royalty when the rest of the galaxy looked at me like I was poison." Danny's eyes were wet now too. "You gave me back my hope," continued. "All of you. You reminded me that I deserved to take up space, to be seen, to belong. You showed me that kindness is not weakness, that reaching out to someone who is alone is the bravest thing anyone can do." She lifted the sash and draped it carefully over her shoulders. It fit perfectly. "I am not alone anymore," she said, "because of you, and I will spend the rest of my life being grateful for that." The mess hall erupted in applause, was surrounded by hugs, by laughter, by the warmth of beings who loved her. The music started playing, something soft and beautiful from Earth, and the celebration continued long into the afternoon. Later that evening, when the decorations had been packed away and the others had gone, and Danny sat together at the corner table, the stars wheeled slowly outside the window, indifferent to the small dramas of the beings who watched them. "Thank you," said quietly, "for everything." Danny smiled. "You do not have to thank me, I just did what anyone should do." "But that is the thing," said. "No one else did. For years and years no one else did. You were the first." She reached out and took his hand. "You changed my life by doing something so simple, by sitting down and seeing me. I did not know that was possible. I did not know one person could make such a difference." Danny squeezed her hand gently. "That is the thing about humans," he said. "We are pretty good at finding the extraordinary in ordinary moments. And you were never ordinary. The galaxy just forgot how to look." Smiled, and in that smile was everything she had been afraid to feel for so long. Joy, belonging, peace. She was not unwanted. She never had been. It had simply taken a human to remind the universe.